The United States Census is comprised of 9 simple questions. But when all is said and done, the answers to these questions will affect hundreds of millions of people for the next 10 years. This is a huge undertaking, involving billions of dollars and a small army of census takers across the country. So, what happens when we get it wrong?
The census has been handed down to us by the Founding Fathers as part of the Constitution.
The population of the United States is continually changing in number, location, and composition.
The enumerators will have to get the full record of each person in this nation.
The census shows where your community and mine need help.
Your name and answers will be kept absolutely secret.
We all have an enormous stake in the completeness and the accuracy of this very important census.
What's interesting about the census is that it's actually, no exaggeration, the cornerstone of our democratic society. So really, anything that you can think of really touches our community, especially our most vulnerable populations, is impacted by census data.
To make sure that each of 13 states would have their fair say in the federal government, the framers wrote in the 6th line of the U.S. Constitution that every 10 years, the government would take account of everyone who's eligible to vote. The first of these surveys, or censuses, only recorded the names of heads of households and other general demographic information. But as the country grew and America got more complicated, so did the census. Today, census data is used to allocate congressional seating, electoral votes, and the distribution of funding for government programs. Without a full and complete count, the integrity of our entire political process is compromised.
The people affected by an undercount is really all of us. This is not an individual impact, it's really a community impact. And so an undercount means less access to resources.
Since 1790, the census has become the largest governmental undertaking in the United States. Over time, census questions have evolved to look more closely at population demographics. Data collection methods have also been streamlined to make the census more inclusive. But even though there are all these new innovations, it's still difficult to get a complete count.
A census tries to count, talk about enumeration, they try to count every single person who is resident in the United States. Doesn't matter, citizen, non-citizen. If you're here, then you're in the count. You're also counting for how to give out federal and state money. And that's really important in public health planning. It's really important in welfare services. It's really important in school districts, important in terms of predicting need in the future, like Social Security funds.
Census data determines where over $675 billion is allocated nationwide, which is nearly the equivalent of the GDP of Switzerland or the price of 4 million in-state UC degrees. This money is then spent on everything from infrastructure to education. Historically, certain demographics are systematically undercounted. People living in low-income areas, urban centers, unsanctioned housing, rural communities, and people of color are often left out. Pacific Elementary missed out on federal Title I funding after the 2010 census underestimated how many of its students live below the poverty line.
I'd say just about everything is understaffed and underfunded. We have really gotten used to getting by with less. If you don't have the money, you just figure it out. We're getting probably about a total of $10,000, maybe $15,000 in federal funding, which was far less, even by percentage, than anywhere else I had worked. Title I is designed to support kids who come from impoverished backgrounds to access the curriculum. And when I got here, I asked, so how much Title I money do we get? And they looked at me like, we don't get Title I. I said, what do you mean we don't get Title I? Every school I've ever worked in has gotten Title I. Is this such a wealthy community that you didn't qualify for it? Like, I don't know, there's lots of poverty here. The census has to get to a minimum number, not just a percent. And if they don't count 10 kids who live in your attendance area living below the poverty line, then you don't get any funding. So even though we were serving those kids, we didn't get money to serve those kids.
Factors like living between homes, living in non-English speaking homes, or living with people who aren't their legal guardians make children the largest systematically undercounted population in the US. But mistrust in the government is another reason people don't provide accurate data.
I think that we live in a time where democracy is seriously under attack. A lot of folks feel kind of disaffected, alienated by the government. But I think that there is that piece of it, of hesitating to participate in a system that feels corrupt.
Often, people don't realize that there are rules in place to help protect the identities and information that is provided by those who participate in the census. Title 13 of the U.S. Code restricts the release of census data and states that the information collected is only to be reported as averages. In other words, your data is not associated with your name, and there has never been any breach of census confidentiality.
There's a lot of distrust in government, especially in the last few years. So we will have to convince people that this process is one they can trust. And that is not easily undone.